On Sunday, I finally got to watch the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 movie in cinemas, and I have to say, I am so glad that I did watch this in a proper theatre. I'd never really seen a horror movie in a theatre before, and this was really cool, and I feel like I got the best experience that I could have gotten with this film. But with that being said, I would be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed. I think a lot of people have been negative online, a lot of critics have been very critical of this film, and I personally am not a huge fan, which I think is surprising because I was really excited for this film, and I definitely don't hate it. As a fan of the series, I really did like a lot of the Easter eggs, secrets, and general fan service this film did have, and I think there are a lot of positives about the Five Nights at Freddy's 2 film. But I feel like this film had a major flaw that completely messed up the entire flow of the film, and not only gave it a very negative critic score, but also upset some fans, which is something that you really wouldn't see. In my opinion, this film is better than the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie, but I can completely understand why people would vastly prefer the first one, because this one really doesn't get it right, and it comes down to a very simple reason. This film makes no sense at all. Like, the whole film is just so confusing. I can understand that this film was made for the fans, but this film didn't explain anything. Nothing made sense, and everything was just implied, or just not even told at all. Like, there is almost no way that anybody just watching this film can understand all of what's going on, because the film just doesn't tell you. As a fan of the series, of course, I know the lore. I get the basic idea of, like, the marionette, Charlie, Henry. But even I was so confused. I think a great example is the puppet. Why was the puppet possessing people and making them fly around like the Nightmare from flipping FNAF 4? Like, it doesn't make any sense, and I genuinely am baffled at how badly this film's plot was put together, because the film makes no sense. And I think the main reason for that is just how they did the second half of the film. Personally, I would say the first hour or so, up until the part where Mike starts, like, role-playing FNAF 2, like he has to survive against the Wizards, that part was fine. I think they built up a great story, and they tried to really, I don't know, create a really, like, elaborate plot. They wanted to make sure that the film had more going on, because the first film got a bit slower points, and they really tried to cram as much. Lots of characters, lots of animatronics, lots of plot points, lots of story. It was all crammed in to an hour of filming. And then the last half an hour, where they're supposed to resolve all the plots they've decided, they just threw it out the window. The last half an hour made no sense at all. It felt like they made the first hour, they took their time, and then they completely rushed the ending. They didn't know how to end this film. And because of that, it just left everyone thinking, huh? Like, I was genuinely baffled by the ending, because I was like, that's it? You're not going to answer anything? You're not going to explain what's going on? What's happening to all the people we haven't dealt with? Like, Michael Afton, he just disappears and is, like, accepted almost immediately. Vanessa at the end getting, like, possessed, it makes no sense. Why did they forget about the puppet? The film is incredibly confusing, and I do not understand why the producers and why the scriptwriters didn't finish it. It really did feel like they just didn't finish the film. I think the problem was they wanted to add more to this film. They wanted to kind of cram everything in and give, you know, more robots, more plot, and they just ran out of time. So they're just left with an unfinished story. And I know that it's Five Nights at Freddy's, you're supposed to just put everything together, but a critic is not going to know anything of what's just happened, and they're not going to take the time to watch a MatPat theory video just to get an idea of what's going on. Like, we all saw Circus Baby and went, oh my gosh, it's Circus Baby from this location, this is amazing. But a critic would have gone, why is there a giant circus animatronic? Anyone going to explain that part? No? Okay. The film doesn't tell you anything. It fully relies on the fact that you already know what's going on, and most people don't. Even dedicated Five Nights at Freddy's fans, like myself, don't know all the lore, we don't know all the story, and yet the film just implied it. The first film kind of explained some things and made it so that a casual viewer could sort of understand the film, but this film, you'd have no idea, like, why on earth the toy animatronics and their old withered counterparts fooled by the mask. But that doesn't make any sense. For us, we all know that's how it was done in FNAF 2. But as I think FNAF pointed out in his movie review, why isn't Foxy dealt with a mask? It's explained in the game FNAF 2, but if you haven't played the game and you don't know, then how are you gonna know? It makes no sense to a casual critic watching the film, and I think that's what a lot of people have had complaints about. The story was pretty bad, to be honest. It made no sense. It felt rushed to points. Every scene was like at most 30 seconds. I think the longest we had was the Spectral Scoopers like FNAF 2 tour. That obviously didn't go very well, and I liked that scene. But most scenes were pretty quick and didn't really have enough time to explain anything, and it just made no sense. And I think the script writers really got carried away with making this for the fans. They forgot about making it for the casual viewers, and I think that's why this film got such a good, fan reputation, but such a bad critic one. And honestly, I can see somebody who's not familiar with the series really hating this film, and it will hurt it. You cannot rely on fan service and fan service alone, because the majority of the people watching a film won't know much. Most people have heard of FNAF, but how many of them actually know all the lore, have actually played all the games? Not many. I mean, the post-credit scene would have made absolutely no sense to anybody who'd never played FNAF 3. And I feel like they didn't think it through at all. The first film kind of told you what's happening. The second film really didn't. I mean, Vanessa suddenly has a brother, Michael. Since when was that explained? It was random even for the fans, so I can imagine what the critics would have thought when Michael Afton showed up out of nowhere. This film wasn't bad. I think it was scarier than the first film. I'll give it that. Although I will admit, the film did rely far too much on jump scares. The film had a lot of, an animatronic would be chasing someone, they'd disappear, it would go silent for about 5 seconds, and then bam, jump scare, loud sound effect. But the film really struggled, and I honestly think that this film, despite being scarier than the first film, still wasn't a major improvement. I think the acting was perhaps a little bit better. I liked all the animatronics, and I think, the overall story wasn't too bad. But it just didn't make sense. Why were the FNAF 1 animatronics helping? Why did they run out of power conveniently at the wrong time? Why did Michael Afton get punched in the face by some random guy who wasn't really explained at all? Like, Mike's friend just kind of showed up. There were a few other cameos in the film. Obviously, Matt Pat playing Taiwanese was super cool, although I didn't really recognize him, to be honest. I thought Megan Fox did a good job as Toy Chica, and Kellen Goff being Freddy was cool, although he didn't really do much at all. And I think the Corey cameo being the taxi driver, that was super funny, and I'm glad to see that brought back from the first film. But those cameos, while they were interesting, they didn't save the overall story of the film. It was entertaining, and it was fun for the fans, but it wasn't very well designed, and with a bad story, you really have struggled a lot. So yeah, that is the real problem with this film. I think they really need to rethink some things going into the FNAF 3 movie. Because as much as I love all the fan service, the Shadow Bonnie Easter egg, that was sick. I love the FNAF 2, the bit where Mike plays FNAF 2. That's really cool. And there is a lot of positives about this film, especially of Mike just rejecting Vanessa at the end. I think that's probably the smartest decision anyone made in that entire film. So I'll give them that. But ultimately, the story really lacked, and waiting 2 years for an hour-and-a-half film that felt kind of rushed, not particularly original, and generally a confusing mess, I have to admit, I was disappointed. I enjoyed it, it wasn't terrible, and I do think I like it more than the first film, just because of all the new Easter eggs, all the new kind of lore they added in. I think there's a lot of really good things about this film. I think, again, the Spectral Scoopers scene was genuinely quite scary and done really well. But so much of this film just felt cringe, rushed, and just not very well done at all. And I really hope that the FNAF 3 movie fixes these problems Because as much as the fans like it, if the critics don't, that's what people are going to look at. And anyone who wants to watch this film is going to see 15% on Rotten Tomatoes and think, oh dear, something's gone wrong here. And that is the big problem with Five Nights at Freddy's 2.